I'm sorry for the prolonged absence, in part contributed to by the holiday, but I'm back. Welcome to the Inequality Chronicles. Tonight's stories: earn a diploma, get buried in an avalanche. Too poor to bank, to educate or incarcerate? That is the question. An overwhelmed renter society. Story number 1. Earn a diploma, get buried in an avalanche. The crisis of student loans is real, no matter what pundits tell you, is the article's title. The source is The Guardian. Author is David Dayen. The date of his publishing was June 26th, and the bullet points are as follows. The Brookings Institution recently released a report suggesting that there's no point to worrying about the student loan debt crisis. Presently, there are $1 trillion of outstanding student loan debt, with a disturbing number of those debts not being paid back. 22% of profit-based college students default on their debt, compared to 1/9 of those attending public universities. The cheapest option for repayment forces the student to pay thousands of dollars more for their debt than if they paid it all at once, which hinders the ability of the indebted to take risks or even start a family life. Briefly, just want to say a few things here. This is an issue that is not being covered sufficiently. Granted, you look around, you will occasionally see a story talking about the student loan debt issue, but this right here is what is preventing, in a lot of ways, the millennial generation, my generation, from being able to go right at it and contribute to this economy the way that we're supposed to, the way that our predecessors had. That as well as I'll mention later, stagnant wages. We are being held back by a lot of things, but in a society that is increasingly reliant on getting a degree, there's something immoral about forcing that generation to also incur almost insurmountable mountains of debt in order to reach the so-called American dream. If we really want our economy to thrive, if we really want to rebuild this country and make it as strong as it really can be, not just our economy, but the world's economy overall, then we have to stop saddling each successive generation with more and more debt in order to enable them to reach that potential. Because we may achieve our dreams for a moment, but it's all the cost of that dream is just forwarded. We just delay it. And like it says, the more we have to rely on debt to do things, it prevents us from actually being able to take risks. And in some cases, you have employers or other interests who look at your credit rating, who assess your debts and determine whether or not you're reliable. So this is, for lack of a better word, irresponsible. And, one other thing. I said in here, comparing the profit-based college student default level with that of public universities. The private universities actually had a lower default level in this report than the public did. It just, after I typed it in, I didn't want to have a bunch of figures on it. I just wanted to point that out here. The problem is more making students take on debt to go to school, period. You can kind of guess what I'm driving at here. It's about time that we fully fund higher education, at least up to a 4-year degree, and offer some kind of offsets, incentives for helping students pay, for getting a master's and doctorate degree. Don't just we shouldn't allow students to amass debt that's going to last them the rest of their adult life or their young adult life. That's just, it's ridiculous. Let's put it that way. All right, story number 2. Too poor to bank. The article's title: Making a Withdrawal. Banks shut branches in poorer communities. The source is Al Jazeera America. Excuse me. The authors are Ranjani Chakraborty, I'm hoping I pronounced that right, and Sarah Hoy. The bullet points. In a 5-year span of time... Oh yeah, by the way, sorry. That was published on June 24th, 2014. Bullet points. Excuse me. In a 5-year span of time from 2008 to 2013, 93% of the 1,800 bank branches to close shop were in low-income areas. As a consequence of living in a neighborhood lacking a bank, the poorest are increasingly forced to rely on the highest interest alternatives, such as payday lenders. 68 million Americans inhabit communities with one or no banks. If it weren't for the charitable actions of credit unions like Hope, the citizens affected would be trapped in a perpetual vicious cycle of paying their loans by forwarding the cost thereof to the next loan. This is an extension of, in some respect, of the previous topic. Not only are we making students fund their education via debt primarily, which is especially exacerbated by the fact that we're pulling back more and more with respect to grants, which don't have to be repaid. We also have this issue, where people, regardless of whether or not they want to seek higher education, are being forced to create debts for themselves just to be able to pay their bills. I mean, if you have no bank to go to, well, what's your options for cashing your checks? You can't have a direct deposit to nothing. So my guess is, the people who don't have the ability, the means to go to the next town over, or drive miles away to go to a bank, they have to rely on these terrible alternatives for getting their money, which comes at a huge price. Speaking from personal experience, I've been trapped in a payday lending cycle before. It had lasted for a few months. It's been a long time ago now, but once you get trapped in it, it's very difficult to get out. Unless you just plan on saying to heck with it and lose, and you go ahead and decide to lose some money. But for these people who live in communities, desperate communities, that don't really have another option except for if some merciful credit union jumps in, that's it. But of course, credit unions can sometimes be difficult to get into as well. It depends on what that organization is. I'm just saying, something has to be done here. I like, personally, the proposal by Senator Elizabeth Warren to have post offices do the banking. Have them do banking. That would definitely help fill that void that's needed here and alleviate some pressure from organizations like Hope Credit Union. So it's definitely a necessity at this point for a lot of communities out there, especially I would imagine in rural communities. Okay. Story number 3. To educate or incarcerate? That is the question. Article's title: 5 links between higher education and the prison industry. The source is Rolling Stone. The author is Hannah Gold. And the date was June 18th. I know it's a little bit dated, but bear with me. The bullet points. Private prisons have grown almost 800% at the federal level in the past 20 years. Private prison shareholders and board members include a number of universities and their representatives, with Columbia University being among them. 20% of schools are said to perform criminal background checks on people applying to attend their institution. Oftentimes, these universities lend a helping hand to the private prison industry by contributing their prestigious reputations to persuasive and friendly studies on behalf of the prison in question. It's hard to think of what to say in this respect. I have very personal feelings, as you know, about what needs to be done regarding higher education. And I also have some reservations about privatizing prisons. I mean, it's been going on for a little while now, I think like 2-3 decades or whatever, the privatization of prisons. But it's just something especially evil, for lack of a better word, about making prison something driven by profit. If your profit motive is to ensure that you have inmates, then where's the incentive to rehabilitate people? To crack down on recidivism? I mean, and on top of that, knowing that there seems to be this really somewhat nefarious connection between these higher education institutions and a number of private prisons, it just makes you wonder, is there some kind of funnel between these two? You know, deny certain students an opportunity to improve their lives and increase the chances that they will be right back in the prison system? I mean, knowing that criminal background checks are performed on people trying to apply for an institution, these background checks are no doubt an aid to helping keep recidivism rates up. Because if you have no hope to begin with, if you have no hope that your life will improve and that you can, you know, get beyond a life of crime, which is not all the times, but a lot of the time based on your desperation, then what's the point? Why try to stay out of prison? This is something that affects minorities more often than it does us whites, us poor whites. And that's just a basic fact, unfortunately. It's a dark part of our, can't say even distant history, it is recent history. It's a big reason why our drug laws need to be reformed, but this right here is just especially horrifying in a way, because we are relying more and more on higher education to help people get their foot in the door and, you know, build a healthy, thriving life. At the same time, these higher education interests are kind of working hand in hand with the prison interests, who benefit greatly, even profit now in certain cases, from people not being able to go up the ladder and improve their lot in life, get out of a desperate situation. Honestly, this needs to stop. You need to take the profit interest out of prison, and you need to get education out of prison, unless it is education's role in the prison system is simply to help rehabilitate people and get them out of that vicious cycle. That should be their only role. They shouldn't be helping each other with studies and stuff. At least not in this way, not to help improve the image of a prison. Yeah, there needs to be more oversight on this. There needs to be more transparency. I'm just horrified by knowing about this connection, period. So yeah, something needs to be done about that. Story number 4. Overwhelmed renter society, as opposed to the ownership society. We'll get to that later. Article's title: Rents are rising, but people aren't making any more money. The source is Think Progress. Author is Alan Pike. And the date was July 2nd. Bullet points. The cost of rent has increased 3.4% in the past year, while the median household income has reportedly been stagnant for 24 years. 90 American cities saw rent costs above the affordability threshold. Demand for rental has skyrocketed in the wake of the foreclosure crisis and stagnant wages. This explosion in demand for rent-based housing has captivated those major interests looking to profit from such as buying vacant homes to invest in them as rental properties has become the latest trend. I've been a renter my entire life. It's just what you got to do when you're poor. You really don't have the option to own your own home. My mom always wanted to. We briefly did when I was a toddler, I guess, but that was not my experience growing up. We were always renters. And I'm presently renting. I would love to own my own home. That would be awesome. But it's just not realistic right now. A lot of the new renters, though, are people who have been pushed into that by losing their homes that they had. Whether they were, taking a mortgage out that they couldn't repay, or they had the ability to repay it, it's just they refinanced or did whatever, did a reverse mortgage, whatever, and they got trapped in this cycle that led to them losing their home. Regardless of why they lost their home, they still own their own home, and it became a nightmare. And now they've been pushed out of that dream, out of the so-called American dream. And it's deplorable how you have certain interests who are looking to capitalize on this. The boost in need, it's not even really people want to rent. No, they need to because they don't have any other option. But yeah, no, you still have these interests. They don't care. All they see is numbers. They see increased demand, so oh look, there's a profit right there. We can jump on that. So the forces of capitalism here are driving the focus seemingly towards rent. I don't know if that's a good trend. I mean, I know what my realistic abilities are, but if too many people are relying on rent, whether I like it or not, the fact is when you have rental properties in an area, the value of surrounding properties drops. It's just a fact. Property values only go up when you have a lot of homeowners, as well as certain, like friendly businesses that don't attract too much traffic. But, certain businesses will help deprive that. That's what I'm saying. But anyways, when you have rental properties, it's bad for the value of a homeowner's property. So this could potentially lead to somewhat of a chain reaction, a domino effect, where more and more people are either forced out of their homes or sort of compelled to sell their homes to these vulture capitalists who want to just capitalize on it and turn it into a rental property and just keep going and going and going. If you built your own home, you're less likely to want to leave it, but if you don't see any value in your home, it just hurts your personal income. And what I'm saying is that this is a problem. We need to do more about affordable housing, but this boost in rental costs as well as in demand for rental, it's not a very healthy course. And especially if wages continue to be where they are, we don't see significant improvement in living wages, because that's the only way people are going to be able to climb out of this rut. We don't want to encourage people to pull back and become just renters. Become subservient to a landlord, especially a corporate one at that. I'm lucky to have a landlord who I feel like I have somewhat of a personal connection with. They're not detached. They don't come on behalf of a real estate company or what have you. This person I care about, but not everyone, especially those who are victimized by this new trend, not all these people are going to be so lucky. They're likely to going to be having landlords who are they'll rent out a property in, say, Kentucky, but they'll be based personally like in New York City near Wall Street or what have you. So it's not a healthy trend. That's all I'm saying. Okay. To recap, even as the Brookings Institution is attempting to sugarcoat the looming student debt crisis, the reality is that it is actively holding back the economy from realizing its full potential. While banks pull their resources out of the worst off in our society, the downtrodden have to hope that credit unions can rescue them from turning to the debt-exacerbating financial black holes that are pawn shops and payday lenders. The cozy relationship between our privatized prison system and higher education is leading some to question the objectives of both. Far from being the ownership society once boastfully envisioned by George W. Bush, more and more Americans are shelving their dream of home ownership as they join the ranks of renters. Is this the America you want? Is this the economy you want? Is this the world you want? Because unless you stand up and do something about it, unless you demand a voice, unless you demand to have some power back in the people's hands, this trend is going to continue. All of these trends. And then what are we going to be left with? Ruins. And probably oral stories of what society once was. That's assuming that we even continue to promote education about our history, which is in and of itself a tragedy. Education is key to building a society, but you also need a strong economy. And we're not seeing that. On top of that, our political power is getting deprived over time. I'm glad to be back into this. I'm going to continue doing whatever I can to expose these issues, bring these articles that you may have missed to you so you can assess them. And I'm going to keep trying to be as forward about my opinions as possible. Because, I have this tendency sometimes to hold back. Being candid at times, to me, feels like I'm being too abrasive. But I think the time for that has come to an end. We have to be. We have to care passionately about these issues. Because if we don't, then we'll only have ourselves to blame for when things fall apart. We didn't do enough. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.